Sorry, I think I'm just hearing
Yeah, we're just
some
gonna
feedback.
amount that I needed to pay, but I need to figure out who it is. Here we go.
Okay, no worries. I will get sharing my screen here and we'll get going. Okay.
All right, everyone. If you've been around for a while, then you will recognize this face for a few reasons. Bree is one of the copywriters on the My Wolf Design team and a previous guest speaker. I'm a big believer in the power of words and copy, and I think it was a no-brainer to make sure that at least one of our months are dedicated to this art and critical component to websites and marketing. So I'm excited to dive into this, Bree. I'll hand it over to you.
Me too. Thanks. Had a bit of a delay there in. Oh, there we go. It skipped forward, but I'm bringing it back. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone so much for joining today. I'm really excited to dive into some actionable tips and strategies that you can use to refine your brand voice and amplify your messaging. I feel like copywriting and just writing your messaging in general can feel so overwhelming. Even if you are a writer, I know for myself sometimes I'm like, oh, I need someone to help me with this. So let's dive into what we're going to cover today. So, messaging is so important for your brand because it helps it build more recognition with your audience, which leads to it feeling more dependable and eventually building loyalty and equity with that audience so you can turn them into customers. So, today we're going to cover the essential elements for your brand messaging, getting to the core of your message to make sure that it's like super clear, because sometimes even just clarifying that can feel like a lot of work. Some tips for simplifying and making that message even clearer, and then some writing tricks, some more strategic stuff to elevate and use your message. From there, we're going to look over some tips for actually starting to apply this to your marketing with a few examples. We'll have lots of time for questions at the end. So, just to introduce myself real quickly, I'm Bree. As Meredith said, I've been on the My Wolf Design team for a while. I also serve clients through my own business, Everbloom, and I help a lot of service-based businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and community organizations to translate their ideas into words, find a voice that allows them to really increase their impact and cut through everything else that's out there. So I work on messaging, website copy, content marketing, and in that way, there are so many things about brand voice and messaging that apply to each of those content pieces that you're likely doing in your business as well. So we're going to go over a lot of those DIY things that can make it a lot easier for you. If you have any questions along the way, I think Meredith might have mentioned this already, but feel free to pop them in the chat. We can answer them at the end, or just put your hand up if it's like something really urgent. But first, we're going to cover the essential elements of your brand voice. Oftentimes, I find that brand messaging is falling flat because the concept isn't clear. It's not aligning with your brand purpose. You are trying to speak to too many people. The voice isn't consistent and the benefits are lost. And all of those can point towards some essential brand message elements that are missing from your marketing. Those brand elements are foundational to being able to speak in your marketing to all the wonderful things that you do for your customers. Before we dive too far into each of those elements, I wanted to take some time to establish kind of where you're at with one of these, which is voice. So, a quick exercise. Can you think of 3 to 5 descriptors for the way that your brand sounds in writing or in interaction with your customers? Just take a few minutes to write this down in your notebook or like in your notes if you're typing. I'll give you a few minutes to think it over, but ask yourself, how do you want people to feel when they interact with your brand? Are you warm and nurturing? Are you maybe more glamorous and sophisticated, or maybe you're very rugged and bold in the way that you interact? So think about how your voice comes across. Maybe you can only think of like 2 or 3, maybe easily you're writing down like 5, but I'll give you a minute to kind of think that over of how you want your voice to come across? I'm going to give you silence so you can focus. Now, in my experience asking this question, like I said, it could be across the board where you immediately have a lot of descriptors come to mind, or perhaps you don't. So let's talk about how those descriptors might apply to voice. If anyone is really confident with their descriptors, pop them in the chat. I'd love to see what you feel your descriptors may be, and we can talk about how those apply to voice. All right. I'm not seeing any in the chat, which is totally fine because I have examples too. So let's say your voice wants to sound very down to earth, expressive, and playful. Oh, here's a few more coming. All right, yeah, authentic, nurturing. Yeah, those all make a lot of sense. Warm, nurturing, casual, and friendly. I'm going to use that example because there's 4 descriptors there. So warm, nurturing, casual, and friendly. When you look at your voice, there are a few elements you want to think about, like your tone, but also the language you use. So casual might be a descriptor that you would use to describe your language because you're using very casual words. You might use more trendy words. You might use simpler language so that it sounds like a casual conversation when you're talking in your content. Warm and nurturing might come across more in your personality. So when we look at the content as a whole, does it feel like someone who is giving me like a warm hug, who is confidently leading the way for me? And that can come across more in the verbs that you choose to use. You might choose to use more positive adjectives to sound really warm and nurturing. You also might use more greetings in all of your content to give that warm, welcoming feeling like, hi, hello, welcome. I invite you to do this. So, those are just a few examples of how those apply to your brand voice. But again, that's just one element for your brand messaging. If we dive into kind of like a checklist of everything that you want to have for your brand messaging, these are the things that immediately come to mind when I'm looking at my own and working with my clients. There's overall as well so many brand pillars in an overall brand that lead to like your visual identity, etc. But these ones are very essential to all of your written content at the very least. So your mission and vision, that's a statement that is primarily internal to you to help guide you in what you do. Your brand values and brand purpose, those can help give more intention behind your messaging. So your brand values might be community, they might be innovation, and that can help center your purpose in your industry as well and how you want your content to show up. If you're looking at each content piece knowing that your purpose is to create community, you can ask yourself, okay, how does this content piece invite people to have a conversation or engage or connect with each other in a more meaningful way? What we just talked about was voice, and especially having clear guidelines for language, tone, and personality. You get bonus points if you actually have these written down and they aren't just in your brain. That kind of goes for all of these, but especially voice. If you're having other people on your team, if you own a business with a few employees who are helping with your marketing, or if you are outsourcing your marketing, it's really helpful to have those descriptors for your voice written down so you can share those with whoever might be helping with your marketing tasks. You also want repeatable messaging and benefits, things you can continually come back and speak to about your business, and we'll expand on that a little bit. And an understanding of your target audience, just generally what they need to know, what they value. And I'm going to expand a little bit on that as well. So let's talk more about the repeatable messaging I mentioned. It needs to have a clear concept at its core, and that should be concise. It should align with that purpose we talked about, and it should be valuable to your target audience. The repeatable messages you have should speak to things like your products or services, who you help and how you reach their goals, the benefits you offer, and your unique value. Let's narrow in a little bit on the value for that target audience piece. As in my experience and with everyone I've spoken with, that's sometimes the sticky part. How do we figure out what's going to relate most to our audience and how can we understand what they're going through? So, to create that value, we need to connect with them directly by defining who they are in the actual message we have. So, for example, the message might say, like, this is a course for small business owners. We can make that more specific. We need to determine what they believe their problem is and appeal to their wants, needs, and preferences. One kind of sticky piece with this is that sometimes it might feel like the thing you think your customer's problem might be is different than what they think their problem might be. This isn't always an easy gap to close, I'll be honest, but a good place to start is connecting with past clients to gain some clarity. If you're brand new in the business and you don't have like a lot of past clients you would want to speak to about this, about what problems they came to you with, then you can look into informational interviews with people who represent your target audience. But a conversation with a real person is always a really helpful place to start.
Bree,
The majority of the time, oh yeah,
I was just going to give a suggestion on if you're struggling with this.
yes, please.
One amazing place to look for what is your client's problem or what they view as their problem is if you have some kind of initial kind of intake form for when they're reaching out and asking, what problems are you hoping to solve? That is essential, I would say, in understanding it and making sure you're speaking to it in like the sales process and in the copy. Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That was actually my speaking notes coming up, so you read my
Oh,
mind.
oops.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, so it's like throughout that client process, there are a lot of those touch points that you can talk to the client about, whether it's at the beginning or the end, but building that into your process helps you gain a better understanding. What I've seen is sometimes it's a lack of context or knowledge about the problem that the audience is experiencing. Our solution might help address the root problem. Like, let's say we want to target business owners who are struggling with perfectionism. They might just see that they are maybe bad at their time management. They might think that they are constantly overthinking things, or maybe they're constantly doubting the worth of their product or service. But all of those things are actually symptoms of a root problem, which is perfectionism. And sometimes our message needs to help inform them about if you're experiencing these things, it could actually be a sign of a deeper problem. And we're also going to dive into that a little bit later. Okay. Now that we've gone over the essential elements, let's talk about how we can use simpler language to make clear messages. We need to find a simple way to convey that concept that we've worked on, and it doesn't need to feel difficult. Some of the easiest ways you can simplify your messaging are by sticking to simple verbs and reducing your descriptors. This helps create more impactful and memorable content because it's very, very specific. It's short to read and easier to digest. These are really easy DIY tips. So they're coming at you a little bit quicker because once you gain the understanding of them, they're very easy to implement into your written content. So one word verbs keep sentences shorter and less complex. We just call them simple verbs. But sometimes you might not realizing that you're adding in extra verbs when you don't need to. So the first example, we will be working to help you confront your challenges. The we will be working is kind of more of a complex verb where we're adding in multiple tenses when we might not need to. And to help you confront also adds in that extra word to help. So we could simplify it just by saying, we will help you confront your challenges. A lot of time when we look at the verbs we're using, we might feel like we need to add an extra to make it feel more professional or come across more serious or knowledgeable. but I guarantee you the simpler verb is always the best way to get your idea across. On the other side is less descriptors. So this is talking about adverbs and adjectives. When you use less of them, you have an opportunity to use them more accurately. I think this example demonstrates that really well. Is we could have a sentence that says, come experience our clean, calm, and beautiful studio space. Likely there's a single adjective or descriptor that could embody all of those descriptions you want to have: the clean, the calm, the beautiful. One example here is harmonious. That can embody all of those elements of what that space feels like. Again, it just keeps a sentence shorter, it gets to the point quicker, and it's easier for the customer to read. If you aren't sure which verbs or descriptors to use, don't be afraid to use a thesaurus or a dictionary online. They are your friend. As a writer, I don't even remember every single slight difference in definition between one adjective and another. I use them all the time. It's okay if you need to look things up too. Okay, those are our simplifying techniques. Next, we want to talk more about applying your message strategically. So some copywriting techniques that are specifically about persuasion and connecting with your audience in different ways so that you can continue to speak to your message in a way that's super clear, but in different scenarios in a different context. So some of those methods are around focusing on emotional benefits, making the customer the hero, using repetition, and again, more about descriptors. I think that descriptors are often overlooked in what we want to write about and how we want to write about things. It's very easy to just add a long list of descriptors when we really can be more intentional. So firstly, emotional benefits are more relatable to your audience, and it gets closer to what their big goal is, what their real aspiration is, than say a functional benefit. A functional benefit might be something like saving time or reduced costs, but emotional benefits are a little bit closer to the root problems that I was particularly talking about before. So if we start with a functional benefit, what emotional benefits come from achieving that functional benefit first? So if the functional benefit is something like saving time, that could also mean that there is less stress because they're putting less work into something. If the functional benefit is gaining an improved design for their brand, that could also bring a business owner more peace of mind and more confidence in how to market their brand going forward. Those are just a few examples of how functional benefits can lead to emotional benefits. And with a deeper understanding of those emotional benefits, your audience actually gets to know their own problems a little bit better. And it allows them an opportunity to build more trust with you. The second tip here is about positioning the customer as the hero in your story. What are the challenges that your customer is going through, but how do you help them overcome them? Like, how do they achieve their goal, get their solution with you at their side? It's about making them the focus of the narrative. And you're kind of like the guide along the way that helps them overcome everything. When we make them the focus in the narrative and repeat the word you really often in our messaging, it helps the audience feel more understood, and again is an opportunity to build trust with them because of that mutual understanding that you're building. Okay, repetition. I feel like some people are afraid of repetition. I think it gets a bad rap sometimes, but there are strategic ways to use repetition. And it's really important because I think all know at this point that repetition actually leads to higher rates of persuasion. So there are some easy ways to DIY it, and these were the top two for me. Is one, repeating your value at every touch point in your content, because not everyone follows the same customer journey. So a potential client could go from your Instagram to a blog post and then to your contact page while another one could start on Google and then go to your portfolio on your website and then go to your Instagram. So if we're not repeating your unique value at all of those different points, then we're missing opportunities to make sure that they are understanding the benefits that you offer and how your solution could be the best solution for them. When we repeat it at each of those touch points, we make sure that the reader sees it and understands it no matter where they're at. The second one is repeating the concept, but not repeating the exact same words. If we are going to repeat a concept at multiple touch points throughout a customer journey, then we need to make sure that it's not the exact same sentence or the exact same wording, because our brains will actually skip over it. So instead of repeating the exact same phrasing, we can take the concept at the root of the message that we established and repeat it in different ways to get the point across. Different ways of rephrasing it can look like putting the customer at the beginning of the sentence and flipping your service to the end of the sentence. Like I could say that my copywriting services help business owners gain more confidence in their marketing. I could flip that to say that you can gain more confidence in your marketing with my copywriting services. That's just something off the top of my head, but that's the way that you can repeat that concept in a different way. It also gives you the opportunity to use some very intentional but repeated descriptors. Descriptors again. So when we use and repeat a selection of descriptors, so not the same adjective every time, but kind of a bank of descriptors that align with our branding, it helps build that connection with our audience and helps that connection to flourish. Again, it's giving them something to associate with your brand, to associate with the benefits you offer. And again, that comes back to your brand voice and that repeatable messaging. I feel like a lot of this comes back to having consistency in your messaging. And I think that's the main takeaway from a lot of these tips, because consistency first builds recognition with your audience. And over time, with more consistency and more repetition, that turns into trust. And that's where those connections and those actions are being taken by your customers. So, with all that being said, you can really reinforce your brand's value through both the words you use and the voice that you use. I'm going to go through an example of how some of these can be put into action. And when we take a look at these examples, I want you to think about the clarity that's coming through the message, as well as the connection we're making with the customer. What aspects of their problems or the benefits that we're giving them are coming through in the messaging to make it easier for them. Okay, so this is an example. Right now, it's a pretty simple statement. It's not really persuading me emotionally to do anything, to get in touch. It's conveying the concept. However, I am not feeling like emotionally stirred to do anything as a reader yet. The next one is an area where we've added in some elements of the customer being mentioned. So the customer is part of the narrative now, rewriting your story. We've also gained a little bit more clarity about how the solution is going to get us somewhere. Now we have an understanding of, okay, this is going to help me achieve this goal. It's going to be the next step on like my healing journey. And with this last example, we've added in a lot of details here so that we can speak to the way that the customer is really the hero now. We've also added in description of the customer, talking about the traits that they have being in this situation and the way that they can take the next step to achieve the goal that they're looking for. We're speaking to those emotional benefits. The narrative is a lot more focused on them and a lot less focused on how we are like the savior for their problems. Even though in our heads we might be, we always want the customer to feel like they are in control and that they are the ones like solving their problems as well. So this really positions us in a way that like we're the helper on their whole journey to achieve their big goals in life. Okay, I feel like I talked really fast and I apologize, but we have some time for questions and answers. But before I dive into that, I wanted to go over a few helpful next steps that you can take to implement these in your marketing. So, firstly, you can start by auditing your brand messaging for the following elements. Um, and after that, you can take a look at your brand voice. I suggest reviewing it by looking at a few of your content channels. If you have social media and maybe you do email marketing and you have your website, take a look at all three of those and see if your voice is coming across consistently on all of those channels. Is it the way that you want it to sound? So take that into account. And then if you don't have written voice guidelines, I really highly recommend that this is the first thing that you write down for yourself. Again, it's very beneficial in keeping yourself consistent when you're creating your marketing material. But as your business scales and as you grow, you want to be able to share that with whoever might be helping you with your content writing. And then finally, start practicing with the simplifying techniques and the strategic writing tips that I shared. I would recommend picking like one of the simplifying ones and one of the strategic ones and implementing them in whatever content piece you're going to be writing next, whether that's a social media post or like an email for your audience. Okay, open it up to questions.
Bree, that was fantastic.
Oh,
The
thank you.
part that stood out, believe it or not, was your examples. I think seeing it laid out on, you had sort of the three, I'll call it tiers,
Yeah.
and breaking it down made it almost validate for me, like, this is an art that, and I don't have one iota of the skill to do that. So kudos to you, but that really stood out. One thing that I have stars next to is a bank of descriptors. I don't know how, I mean, you and I talk every day, and how have I not ever done that? So that is going to be one of the very first things that I do, at some point when I have a moment to do that. So
Yeah.
fantastic. And I'm going to put words in your mouth or an offer in your mouth, but if you wanted to use some of this Q&A, if somebody is open enough to show their homepage, maybe you could do like a real time, like, hey, you could switch this language or this word kind of thing.
Yeah,
That would be pretty
absolutely.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If
That's
there's
my
any
2 cents.
questions first, then oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
If there's any questions first, then we can answer those. And then yeah, if there's time, we can also like go through a quick thing. If like someone isn't open enough, I could also just find like a random no, I shouldn't just find a random one online. But to speak more to that whole like bank of descriptors thing,
Yeah.
um, that's something that I've just found like really helpful when creating content for a lot of different clients. It's not always something that's considered like a part of like essential brand pillars or like guidelines that you need to have for your brand. But to just give yourself an extra leg up and make sure that all of your content's coming across in a consistent way, why not have like specific adjectives picked out and take the time to be really intentional about them? That way, you don't have to be intentional every time you make a new piece of content. You can just take that time once, have it like one and done, and be like, yes, this is the adjective I want to use in this scenario to get across multiple ideas or multiple descriptions of a thing.
Yeah. I love it. Mhm.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Bree? Or want her to look at anything?
Like any and all questions. It could be something unrelated to this that we didn't cover. It could be building off of this. Happy to give like any input that I can.
Nothing. all good.
All right.
Perfect. Well, you practice what you preach with the um, concise. It's great. So, well, everyone, you just
I'll
got,
be real. It is a practice. It
yeah.
is a practice.
Good. Well, I'll include Bree's contact information in the replay. So if you do have any questions that maybe you just didn't want to ask in front of everyone, you'll have her information. But thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next month with Kate. We're doing a brand audit actually. So cool. All right.
Woo.
Bye everyone.
Thanks, everybody.